I'm 43 years old. I have a daughter, Maria, with my late wife, who's 25. We were stupid and had her very young, but we were lucky because both of our parents supported us. We made it through college, and I proposed. My then mother-in-law gave me an engagement ring. This was her family's heirloom. We married when we were 27. Unfortunately, my wife died 5 years later when Maria was 15. It was very hard for both of us, but we made it through. 3 years after my wife's passing, I met Chris, who was 25 at the time. There is some age difference, but she completely won me over, so we started dating. Maria was totally against it, always making snarky comments, but we both brushed it off. We thought she just needed time. After 2 years of dating, I proposed to Chris and we announced our engagement at family dinner. Maria lost it, called me a creep, and called Chris some ugly names. She ruined our announcement. Chris didn't hold back this time and told her to grow the duck up, that we don't need her permission and that marriage is happening whether she likes it or not. Needless to say that it did not end well. Maria stormed out and went no contact. Years went by. I reached out many times but got no response. At some point, I had to move on. I had my new family to take care of. Then, last week, I get a call from her after 5 years of no contact. She was all nice, no apologies, and then told me that her boyfriend wants to propose and asked me for her mother's engagement ring. I told her no. After so many years of no contact, she didn't even ask me how I am. Then I told her that she abandoned me. I moved on, and she can't expect anything from me anymore. She hung up and then told all of the family. Now, I have my parents behind my back. My ex-mother-in-law called, furious, and told me that this ring belongs to my daughter as a family heirloom. I have some doubts now. Legally, it's mine, and Maria practically disinherited me. But I don't know. Am I the a-hole? You're the a-hole. I'm sorry. You're saying your daughter disinherited you? Dude, you are disinheriting her by keeping the ring that was her late mother's. Given the fact that you didn't pay for said ring, you have zero claim over it. Honestly, the ring should have gone to her before she moved away, but it didn't. Now, when it's time to pass it along, and an opportunity for an olive branch and reconciliation, you were being childish and not giving her the literal inheritance left by her mother in that side of the family. Grow up. Huge a-hole vibes. You're the a-hole. I can see why she went no contact. Sounds like your daughter judged you and the new wife correctly. Give your daughter her mother's ring. I can't believe you actually have to be told this. Unpopular opinion, everyone sucks here. Here's my math. You were 32 when your wife died, 35 when you met Chris, who is 25. Decent age gap, but nothing atrocious in my opinion. Chris is 25 when Maria is 18. That's a little close for comfort between Maria and Chris. But you're a young father, so I feel like that's to be expected if you date anyone younger than yourself. You got married 5 years after your wife passed. Everyone is different, so I can't say if that's short or long, but it's not like you were remarried within the year. Maria sucks for being a brat about your relationship, unless you're leaving something big out like an actual conflict between her and Chris, or any mistreatment, neglect from you, Chris, directed toward Maria. Chris sucks for losing her crap at Maria. You both suck for brushing it off the entire 2 years of your relationship that your daughter hated your girlfriend or fiancé. That should have been addressed very early on, instead of coming to a head when you announce your engagement. But you did try to reconcile after she went no contact, and you can't force someone, assuming you did your best. As for the ring, I think that's hard. I can see how it is emotional and sentimental to you. I would have a lot of trouble giving up something so meaningful to anyone who hasn't spoken to me in years, regardless of their relationship to me. Like you said, it's legally yours. My only qualm here is that it was mother-in-law's first, and she wants it to keep being passed on to your daughter. That's hard. I don't know the right answer to that part. Overall, I think everyone in this story messed up. Maria was 20 at the time she went no contact. Still young, but technically an adult. But she had years to reach back out and never did. So you can't say she's blameless here. You and Chris should have tried a lot harder, a lot earlier, to build a relationship with her included. It's just a bad outcome to a bad situation. My brother's getting married and asked if my twins, 17 female and male, could perform something. My daughter's in choir and son's in a band, so they're both musically talented and they love their uncle to bits, so they were over the moon and began planning something immediately. Well, a couple of days ago, I got a phone call from my future sister-in-law. She was talking about how she wants her wedding to be perfect and have a very delicate vibe. In other words, pure and angelic. She then made a joke about how opposite my twins are. I laughed along because I really did not understand what she was implying. She finally got to the point though, and asked if my daughter could just do a solo instead of having my son join. I asked her why, and she awkwardly explained that she fit the themes of her wedding better. No offense, of course. Your son's great. He's just a bit much. Isn't too pure and innocent either, is he? Don't want to give my parents the wrong impression. I mean, I suppose. He's more into rock and stuff like that. His hair is messy and he dresses exactly the way you're imagining, but he's not a bad kid. And it's not like he was going to play a crazy rock and roll song at the wedding either. And he wasn't going to show up in baggy ripped jeans or whatever. I told my future sister-in-law that what she was requesting was really unfair, and that my brother asked the both of them. It would crush my son if he was asked to back out. I asked her if she would be willing to tell my son. She said no, that she's not his parent. I just told her that I'm not going to be the one to break my son's heart. She called me a difficult old woman. I'm only 5 years older than her, who's going to ruin her special day. She yelled at me some more about not taking responsibility as his parent before hanging up. Her sister texted me sometime later, saying that my son's a big boy and he'll be fine. But they're not the ones who've been listening to him talk about how excited he is to perform for his uncle, who he sees as his father figure. Am I the a-hole? I know that I should be the one to break it to him, but what she's requesting really is not fair. She should have at least discussed it with my brother before he put the idea in their heads. Not the a-hole. You need to talk to your brother about this ASAP. Let him sort things out with his bride. Do not mention anything about the conversation with Bridezilla to either of the twins. If changes are called for, your brother should be the one to rescind the invitation to your children, not you. Not the a-hole, but I wouldn't let either kid perform. If you let daughter perform without her brother, it's going to cause a rift, potentially sibling rivalry and jealousy. Sister-in-law being a huge female dog. Dying to know if precious future sister-in-law also fits into her pure theme. OP, go tell your brother and report back what he says ASAP. I'm stuck in a hospital waiting room and need drama to feed my soul. Update. My brother didn't believe it at first, but eventually confronted his fiancée about it. She said some weird things apparently, but ultimately denied it and kicked him out. He's staying with me while he figures things out. The kids don't know yet, and we don't plan on telling them for a bit. They're having fun with their uncle, though. His fiancée is ignoring all his calls and stuff, so I guess the wedding's on hold. I have 2 daughters, Maddie, 30, and Jess, 28. They're both beautiful young women with a lot going on for them. Maddie got married in summer 2021, while Jess got married this past December. Maddie always wanted a traditional large wedding with the whole extended family and the big reception. She ended up having about 150 guests attend, and it was a blast. Jess, however, always wanted something more low-key, which suited her personality better. She doesn't love being the center of attention, and said many times how she thinks spending a ton of money on one day is unreasonable, which is fair. From the time they were little, my spouse and I saw that coming, and were okay with it. Planning Maddie's was a lot, so we were honestly a little relieved when she told us. She had a very small wedding, but then rented out a space for a celebration a week after that she invited relatives to. Due to a few factors, which I believe would be doing it in the winter versus summer, not inviting people to the real wedding, and just being less of a social person her whole life than Maddie, not as many relatives attended Jess's event. We have a large extended family, but only about 1/3 of the relatives who went to Maddie's wedding attended Jess's event. She also didn't receive nearly as much money gifted. Maddie told us from family her husband and her got about $25K, which they put towards a down payment, while Jess got some money, but just a few thousand, mostly from her grandparents. Jess was complaining about it this weekend and saying how the favoritism that Maddie got was unfair. Said that it's proof that the family doesn't care about her, and to be honest, she was sounding a little bratty. I told her she shouldn't be surprised that people she chose not to include in her actual wedding weren't willing to travel to the other event or be as generous, and that she should be grateful people came at all, and that her parents paid for everything. I told her for having no expenses and still getting a few $1,000s, she should be thankful. Jess did not take that well, and called me an a-hole, and has been very, very upset. I personally think she's being a little overdramatic, and will get over it, but Maddie told me I was being a little harsh, even if what I said was true. Am I the a-hole? Adding to answer the common question. For Jess's event, we rented out a restaurant event space. There were drinks and hors d'oeuvres, but it was not a traditional wedding reception, i.e., no full meal, dancing, no DJ, band, no wedding party speeches or anything like that. This was exactly what she wanted, and my spouse and I paid for it entirely. Not the a-hole. Why would your family give money to a couple who didn't even invite them to the wedding? The cash gift was just that, a gift. They're lucky to have received more than they spent on the wedding, which was paid for by parents. Not the a-hole. Who seriously cries because they only got a few thousand as wedding money? That's very spoiled and ungrateful. I can see why fewer people came and gifted her money. Edit. A massive part of this was missed off the original post. From reading the comments, only 10 people were invited to the wedding, and the rest were invited to a celebration dinner at a restaurant on another day. Jess is seriously the a-hole. A celebration dinner isn't a wedding, and I don't imagine those attending really thought about giving a wedding-style present. This isn't about favoritism. This is about 2 different events receiving different gifts. Not the a-hole. Did she seriously expect gifts from people she didn't invite? As we introverts know, there is a significant economic cost to being the way we are. Don't get how she has not grasped this until now. So, I'll be 28 this year. My dad will be 60. When I was 4, so in early 2000, my grandfather died of cancer. He was 63. A bit of background about him. He was born in 1937 and was a kind man, but I barely remember him, of course. There are some wonderful pictures of us laughing together. He was in the Navy. We're American, although he had dual citizenship in Ireland as his grandfather was Irish, during the Cold War, and he was the engineer of some submarines that were used at the time. He married my grandmother in a Catholic ceremony in 1962. My dad, who is his oldest kid, my dad was born in 1963. His brother was born in 1966, and his sister was born in 1970, was pretty close to him. My younger brother is named after him. My grandmother, who was a firm atheist, no wonder that didn't work out, right? Divorced him in 1979, leaving their 3 children behind with him, though she originally left in 1975. The divorce just wasn't finalized yet, though she did return for my aunt after a year or so. My grandfather was crushed, and so my dad, at the age of 12, essentially raised his younger brother and took care of the house. The house in question is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1-story in the Bay Area of California. One of the most expensive places to live in the country. It was paid off entirely well before his death, and he left behind a substantial amount of money, but more on that later. In early 1980, he married my stepmom. They loved each other very much. She too had several children from her first marriage. 3 daughters, I think, but I've only ever met 2 of them. They're about the same age as my dad, maybe a bit younger. In any case, my grandfather died in 2000. For the remaining 18 years of his second wife's life, she never worked, never got on any kind of government assistance. In that time, my dad always treated her very similarly to his biological mother, despite having been 15 or 16 when he met her. She was my grandmother, the same as my 2 biological grandmothers. In fact, I saw her the most frequently of the 3 until we moved to another state. She treated me like her grandchild, and my dad like her son. I didn't even know which of my grandmothers wasn't related to me until I was older. It was all the same. In fact, all 3 of my grandmothers got married and had their first child before the age of 20. All 3 of them got a divorce, and they all gave me the same advice. Don't do what I did. I followed that advice, which all 3 of them appreciated. Anyway, she died in early 2018. She never told us she had cancer. No one knew until after her death, except her eldest daughter. We all were devastated, of course, but she was nearly 80. She was just the same as I remember her being when I was 5, but she had indeed aged. My grandfather's entire estate went to her upon his death, of course, because she was his spouse, but we never got a penny of it. My dad, his eldest son, his biological child, didn't get the fully paid off, as I said, house he grew up in. A house the same size in the same area costs between $650,000 and $1 million today. Instead, it went to a woman who lived there for 2 years before she left for college. The rest of his estate, which my dad's stepmom had been living comfortably off of without working for 18 years, went to her daughters. In her will, she specified that my dad, his siblings, or any of their children were not to receive any of the estate. None of it. We never got a penny. We don't even know what happened to it. My dad asked his stepsister, the one who was the executor of the will, and she refused to even discuss it. She yelled at him for asking, blaming her grief on her refusal to talk of it. Well, it's been 5 years, and she still refuses to discuss it. She gave us handmade blankets. My dad, who kept one on his bed for as long as I can remember, has since donated them. The betrayal I feel, the betrayal my dad feels, is probably the worst part, because his stepmom, the woman I had always thought of as my grandmother, is gone now, and we can't even ask her why she took the money from us, why she denied us the house my grandfather died in, where my dad grew up, where the only memories I have of my grandfather all take place. I'm someone who wants to think the best of everyone. That's a hell of a lot harder when the person who wronged me is dead and can't explain themselves. I will never know why. I will never know what happened to that money. None of us will. It's lost, and so is everything my grandfather left behind. In short, it sucks. Did any of you attempt to contact an estate lawyer or probate? Probate court should have listed you and your father and his siblings as people with a vested interest in the property at the very least. Unfortunately, your grandfather trusted the wrong person, but you may be able to still contest the inheritance, especially since the executor refused to discuss or disclose any information. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know the statute of limitations, but please, get some of the answers you need. It should be public record. I'm sorry for your multiple losses and the huge betrayal, but greed is a horrible reality when death and money is involved. Your grandfather had terrible taste in women.